This is the VW ID.4, and it might look like any other family SUV, but it's actually one of the most important cars in VW's lineup right now. And that's because this is the first ever electric car that VW are gonna sell globally. They're gonna flog these things in China, Europe, and America because electric family cars are hot property right now. And they're hoping that this one is the one that people are gonna turn to. And why not? Because it seems to tick quite a few of the boxes that you might want from a family electric SUV. It's practical, it's spacious, it's quite nippy, it's got good range, and it looks pretty decent as well. There's a lot riding on this one. Is it any good? This is the VW ID.4 First Edition. The First Edition is a limited run, and when these sell out, it will be replaced by a host of other different trim levels. Let me talk you through the headline features. They cost about £40,000. It'll go head to head with the likes of the Nissan Ariya and the Tesla Model Y when they're released, and of course the Ford Mustang Mach-E. It's got a 77 kilowatt hour battery pack, which will do 310 miles. In terms of looks, not exactly adventurous, but remember VW are trying to sell this car in as many markets as possible. So they're trying to play it safe and have it appeal to a wide cross section of people. But I do like some elements of this. I do like these aggressive yet assertive looking headlights. This thing isn't actually a light bar. That's just plastic. There is a light bar on the back though. I'll show you that in just a second. And I'm not 100% convinced by this little plastic section down here, but on the whole, decent car, good proportions. It has the size of a mid-sized SUV, but the interior dimensions of a larger SUV. Very clever packaging. Let me show you the sides. You got 20-inch wheels at the front, 20s at the back, and you'll notice you have disc brakes at the front, but drum brakes at the back. Why is that? Is that a cop-out by VW? Well, they say that electric cars very rarely use their disc brakes at the rear, and what ends up happening is that it's the electric motor that harvests the power and slows the car down. So if you had disc brakes, they'd end up going rusty and being completely redundant. So they've ended up putting drum brakes there because that means you don't have to replace disc brakes when they go bad. If you believe that, I've got a bridge in London I'd like to sell you. Let me show you these, I don't know, it might be true, who knows? Let me show you these door handles. These might look like normal door handles, but they're actually not. They use a switch underneath. You put your fingers under here, it unlocks the car and you pull it. They don't actually move. What happens if the car runs out of batteries? They've thought of that. What you do is you pull this really hard and the whole thing moves, and that allows you to unlock it like a proper mechanical door handle. Why they didn't just install proper mechanical door handles in the first place? Beggars belief? I don't know. Maybe it's an aerodynamic thing. Maybe this helps the car cut through the air more efficiently. But then you look at the size of these wing mirrors and it makes you wonder how much more efficient these are. Still, look at this actually, let me show you this. This section pops off and you have a physical key which you can use to unlock the car when the batteries run out, if the batteries run out. But again, I'd have preferred normal door handles. Back here, you have the charging port. You only get a charging port on the right-hand side, but it accepts both AC and DC rapid charging. And I'll show you the back. These lights are lovely. And actually, the proportions of this car from the rear look really nice, but you've got this light bar across the back end, lovely intricate detail, a lovely 3D effect from the lights. I think they've done a really good job with that. Let me show you the storage. There is no frunk in this car, no fruit, but you do have a massive boot. It's 542 litres. And considering that the Ford Mustang Mach-E is about 400 litres, this is far bigger, far more usable, far more practical. Plus you've got loads of tethering points, you've got hooks for your shopping, and underneath you have an area dedicated to storing your normal charging cable and also your granny charger. So plenty of storage in there, and the seats actually fold forward as well to give you even more space to play with. They've done a really good job with that. One thing that is slightly annoying is that this doesn't come with a power tailgate. There's a little place where the button might go for a power tailgate, but you actually have to operate it manually, and that might be annoying if you're in a wheelchair or you have limited mobility. So slight inconvenience there, but let me show you the rear. Definitely no inconvenience in the back of this car. It's got so much space. It's the size of a mid-sized SUV on the outside, but it gives you the room of a larger SUV. on the inside. And look at that, loads of legroom, plenty of headroom in this car. And even though the seat is a little bit high because they've raised the floor up to accommodate the batteries, it doesn't feel uncomfortable. And in fact, if you're a child, being higher up allows you to see a little bit more over the tops of the occupants in front of the car. So it's actually a lovely space in here. Plus you've got 2 USB ports. There's no independent temperature control for the rear of this car, but you do get plenty of space in the door binnacles. You've got armrests, you've got cup holders, you've got Isofix, 2 of them in the back, 1 in the front. One thing I'm annoyed about though is the fact that you've got this glossy piano black section here on the door handle. Whoever designed this clearly does not have children. That is going to get scratched to oblivion. Let me show you the front. Right, there's a lot to like about the front of this car. The first thing that I notice when I get in are these really cool play and pause icons on the accelerator and brake pedal. That's a really nice touch. Not 100% sure about these seats though. This brown and blue suede thing is, it looks interesting, but the longer you look at it, the more you think, nah, not for me. In terms of space, you've got plenty to play with. You've got 2 cup holders up here. You've got this roller blind section down here, which gives you even more space. You can get 2 more cups in there. There's a little space for your mobile phone down there, some ambient lighting. I wish they'd made better use of the space down here though, actually, because that could have been an area for keeping something or other, but clearly they didn't bother with that. In terms of screens, well, I've gone on record as saying that I'm not the biggest fan of VW's new infotainment setup, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. Up here, you've got this instrument cluster mounted on top of the steering wheel, so when you move it, the whole thing moves. I think it works pretty well. It looks a bit weird, but does the job. But I do like this drive selector. Twist it forward to activate drive, twist it back to reverse, or push it in to park. Right, time to unleash hell. Actually, okay, so hell isn't what you want from this car. It's a family SUV, so you want it to be more like heaven, don't you? And actually, first impressions, it's very nice. It does that thing that electric cars do so well. It's really, really refined. In terms of comfort, it's pretty good. These seats are not too hard, not too soft. They're very supportive. You also get a little adjustable armrest up here, which makes long journeys that little bit more bearable. And also, there's plenty of adjustability in the seats. I'm gonna drop this right the way down to the bottom so you can see how low you can go in this car. That is about it. So you can drive it if you're really tall because you get loads and loads of headroom in here. What about if you're really short? Bear with me, caller. I'll crank it all the way up to the top. Surprisingly, still got quite a lot of headroom to go. I was expecting to go a little bit higher than that. So if you're really short and you're expecting a really commanding driving position, then you might be a little bit disappointed, but I still have quite a good view around the car. I know exactly where the edges of the ID.4 are. As for the steering, well, it's nice and light. It's actually got a 10.2 meter turning circle, which is very impressive for an SUV. This is a very maneuverable car that you're gonna have no problems whatsoever driving. The suspension isn't quite as good as I might like though, because it's actually quite jiggly. This is a very heavy car. It weighs 2,600 kilograms. And what that means is they have to apply stiffer suspension, stiffer dampers in order to cope with the weight. And what that results in is a quite nervous ride. It's not unbearable by any stretch of the imagination, but even on reasonably smooth roads, it's not the smoothest ride.
The brakes, meanwhile, are strong and consistent on the open road, but it took me a while before I was able to stop smoothly in slow-moving traffic. There is no one-pedal driving option, but you can select from 2 levels of brake regeneration by twisting the drive selector from the D position to the B position. And VW have even added a bit of technology to make your life easier on the move.
One thing I want to talk about is the light bar that runs along the full width at the bottom of the windscreen. Essentially, it lights up to communicate with the driver. So here's how it works. If I try and use the voice activation feature, for example, hey ID, hello ID, it's not working. Never works. I'm gonna come back to that in a minute. But when it does work, the bar lights up to let you know that the car's listening. It also works in conjunction with the sat nav. For example, if you've got an exit coming up on your left-hand side, the bar will light up on the left to let you know. Or if you're about to have an accident, the bar will flash bright red to let you know that maybe, just maybe, you might want to apply the brakes. What's it like in terms of performance? Well, it's not going to set your pants on fire, but it does have a 200 horsepower motor connected to the rear wheel, and that's enough to supply 0 to 62 in 8.5 seconds and 99 miles an hour flat out. I had my foot to the floor just then. So it's not the fastest car in the world, but it's nippy enough. It's got 310 Newton meters of torque, on the low side for an EV if you ask me, but there's plenty there to get you out of trouble or to overtake. As for handling, well, it's not the most fun in the world, certainly not on a par with the Mustang Mach-E, for example. That thing can drift round corners if you're so inclined. This will not indulge in any sideways action, even though it's rear-wheel drive. It's more competent and capable than fun, shall we say. What's less good is the infotainment system in this car. I feel like I lay into VW products on an almost daily basis, but if you're gonna spend 40 grand on an ID.4, you need to know what you're getting yourself in for, and the infotainment system ain't the best. First and foremost, there's no volume knob. Secondly, the volume slider up here is temperamental, to say the least. The steering wheel buttons are so big and so ill-placed, you press them accidentally all the time. You can't easily see the battery percentage you have left, only the mileage, and that calculates how you have been driving and not how you will be driving, so you can't work out what happens if you slow down and drive sensibly. We need a percentage on the screen. The voice recognition is completely confusing. To activate it, you say, "Hello ID," instead of "Hello VW," which you say on VW's other products, which makes you think, isn't this a VW? Aren't they connected in some ways? It's just utterly confusing. And the last one is the most infuriating for me, and that is there is no independent window control for the rear windows. To control the windows in the back, you have to press the rear button and then the same button that you used to put down your front window, which to me just makes no sense whatsoever. Volkswagen, sort it out.
What can I do for you? Please connect a phone via Bluetooth first. Please remember that you should not.
What are you doing? What are you doing? What is going on? All right, I've had enough. Let's carry on. Let's talk about range now, which is very important in an electric car. This first edition comes with a 77 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is enough for a range of 310 miles on the WLTP cycle. You're also going to get the option in the future of a car with a 55 kilowatt hour battery pack, and that's going to be good for a range of just over 200. What do you get for your money in the real world? Well, I was doing the school run in this car, which is a mixture of 30 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour, and stop-start traffic. So a little bit of everything. And the car told me it was getting 4.4 miles per kilowatt hour. If you multiply that by 77, that's the capacity in the batteries, then you get a total range of 338 miles. And that raises an important question, actually, because I do a 10-mile journey to school. So that range is enough for me to last about 3 weeks without recharging. So do you need off-street parking? Do you need your own personal charger if you have an ID.4? Potentially not.
As for motorway range, when cruising at 70 miles an hour, I achieved an estimated range of 177 miles. Cruising at 60 miles an hour returned a more impressive 263 miles. Nearly 100 miles more range if you're willing to sacrifice a bit of speed.
You know what? On the whole, this is a really good family car, electric or not. I love the fact it's got an enormous boot. The back is super spacious, super practical. The range is terrific, I think, for my needs anyway. And also it drives pretty well. It's not as fun as something like a Tesla Model Y, for example, or a Ford Mustang Mach-E. And it's not the fastest thing in the world, but in terms of the way it drives and what it offers and how it will fit in with your lifestyle, I think VW have done a really, really good job with the ID.4. I mean, apart from the obvious, all this stuff down here, the infotainment system, I could do without, but you can plug your phone into that and use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So on the whole, not a bad family car, not a bad family car.